That is it.
Croeso all, welcome back to the Feelers in Devotion podcast, sponsored by the Fat Bull Bar and Restaurant. This is Rhys back in your ears this week after a short hiatus. No Tim this week. He's very tired after a holiday. Andy, we didn't think would be with us because he's very tired after a half marathon, but you're here. Well done, mate. How was the
Yeah, well,
experience?
it's fine. I probably need our guest to help me through this. Sometimes when you need to sort of think about some sort of like big sort of event, you need to like talk to yourself, and yeah, Sam could probably help me there. Anyway,
Yeah,
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
we'll get to our special guest, Sam. Is it Kotadia?
Well pronounced. Perfect.
Thank you very
Perfect.
much. Who is a sports psychologist who, those of you who have been watching Welcome to Wrexham will have seen his appearance in episode 3. But before we turn to Sam, let's talk about the main news, Wrexham-related news of the week. New CEO, of course, has been appointed following Fleur Robertson's departure, and that is Mike Williamson. Liam, do you want to talk to us about what we know about Big Mike so far?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I
Big.
think I think it was a bit of a surprise to all of us, really. I didn't really see the announcement coming when it did, so I've done a little bit of digging. So I've got his LinkedIn in front of me, which is always quite helpful in these scenarios, I find. So he start of his career, he spent around 7 years in total with DC United in the US. Firstly as chief financial officer, later chief operating officer. Things then get very interesting for Mr. Williamson as he moves over to Inter Milan. Didn't think I'd be saying that about one of our chief executives, where he's had various roles: chief strategy officer, corporate director, chief financial officer. Then moved on to become joint CEO of the company which runs the San Siro Stadium, which, yeah, incredible ground, but also been a lot of restructuring there, as I understand it, over the last few years. So seems like he was heavily involved in that. And then most recently, chief exec of Miami FC. The one thing, sort of the immediate questions that obviously spring to mind is there any specific reasons why he might be coming in? I've done a bit of digging and I think possibly there's some clues in there. So it said during his time with Inter, he was very active in dealing with the stadium, the restructuring of the San Siro, and research for a new training ground. Now, I might be, reading a bit too much into it, but those are all pretty big priorities for us in terms of ground redevelopment, looking for a new training ground. We've had a couple of people on the podcast who said that's what Wrexham really need to do now. So to me, I don't know about anyone else, but I think that's perhaps a big part of perhaps why he's been brought in. He's got that experience of dealing with those infrastructure elements that perhaps a lot of it's been left to Sean Harvey, do we think so far, fair to say?
Yeah, I would definitely say more so than Fleur.
Yeah, he seems to tick a lot
Oh,
of boxes, doesn't he? Tommy, what was your reaction when you saw his appointment?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of CVs, possibly one of the best signings we made, maybe on and off the field. I mean, he's certainly worked at a very very high level within the game, and replacing Fleur there. I think it's fair to say Fleur was not a popular person amongst the fan base for various reasons, which I'll probably leave them there. But yeah, I think to me it looks like a really really solid point. Liam said there in terms of infrastructure, which is something. I mean, we've got it right on the field, haven't we? It's the infrastructure element now, seems to be a little bit more challenging. Certainly, training ground and the new cop. So certainly, with his experience, that looks like a great appointment to me. And I just wanted to say as well, I think the training ground element is one thing that maybe not a lot of fans talk about, but yeah, the youth section, the youth team, and things like that. Until we can enable that to grow, we have to get the infrastructure in place. From that perspective, it looks like a brilliant appointment.
Rhys, do you mind if I come in here a little bit?
Fine, go on then.
Okay, there's two things here. Two things I think. I actually think that even though a lot of people are talking about infrastructure, I mean, what would you bring a guy like Mike Williamson in for? Well, really and truly, I think you bring this in to grow in North America. And so, would it be actually that Sean Harvey is actually going to take over the UK operation, and maybe Mike Williamson would actually do things abroad? And I think that's actually where we can grow and no one else can. Right? No one else in League One can grow anywhere near what we can do in North America, okay? Because what we've got. So I think Mike's been brought in to do that. And the other thing about the infrastructure, I absolutely agree about that. We absolutely need to get a training ground in. I'm sure Sam can come into this a little bit later about how important that is. But I really think that's a Sean Harvey job. I don't think that's a Mike Williamson job. I don't think he's going to be getting onto the council and saying, "Come on, where we're going to go with this." I think he's been brought in for something a little bit different.
He's going to be the CEO though, so I mean, the buck will stop with him in regards to that.
I mean, yeah, we say the CEO, but Sean Harvey's been running this club for 2 or 3 years, hasn't he? Of course he has.
But maybe that's not an ideal situation. And yeah, either way, definitely his American connections make him mean that sort of growth potential out there is obviously something they want to keep on with because it's going pretty well, but they want to maybe accelerate it. But yeah, interesting. Maybe we could chat a bit more about Michael Williamson in the weeks to come. Before that, though, we now know the final lineup for League One next season after the playoff finals from League One and League Two took place this weekend. So Oxford were promoted, which means that Bolton Wanderers remain in League One. That is a crying shame because I was looking forward to a trip to Oxford. While Crawley Town will join us in League One after beating Crewe. Any thoughts, Tommy? No Crewe derby next year.
Yeah, I mean, good and bad news there. I think for me, I know Oxford's a better one for you, mate. But no, I certainly, I was happy to see Bolton stay down. In all honesty, on the flip side, it would have been nice to go to Crewe again. But yeah, well, who doesn't like a nice 25-hour trip or whatever it is to Crawley. So, but that's a handy one for Gilpin. So we're covering all bases here.
25 hours? Fucking hell, are you flying in via fucking Beirut or something?
Mate,
25 hours?
It's not easy with 3 of us on the back of a scooter, mate. But no, it's a long way, mate. Right. I drove it last year. It's a hell of a long way, and the M25, as you know, mate, is an absolute disgrace. So yeah, it's not ideal to be playing Crawley again. But do you know what? That league, and I was speaking to a couple of people yesterday, and it's crazy, isn't it? 2 years ago, we were in the National League, and we were actually covering a lot more miles in the National League. There's far more for local games now. So it's a strange situation where we seem to be going higher and higher, and games seem to get a lot more local derbies, which is weird. But yeah, I'm happy with the outlook of the league, and I just can't wait till August now.
Yeah, how great is it to be back in a league with teams like Birmingham and Bolton? That's just, class. But I mean, 2 very, very big dogs before we even get on to anyone else for next season. So hopefully there'll be some signings coming in the building that will sort of get our excitement levels up. Who knows? Before we go on to talk about episode 3 of Welcome to Wrexham, as I mentioned earlier, episode 4 came out this week. Quick thoughts, Liam? I mean, I didn't feel like it was quite as exciting as some of the previous episodes we were treated with.
I'm going to give it the old poo sandwich treatment in that it wasn't really one for me particularly. What I've liked about the new episodes really is the fact that it has been quite heavily football focused. So I think perhaps for me, that's why I didn't enjoy it as much. I'll start off with a good thing. I really like the chat between Neil Roberts and Rob McElhenney about Mia's situation. I thought it was decent of him to address it. He didn't pass the buck, but he also didn't Rob didn't chuck anyone under the bus in terms of the club wise either. It was sort of a well handled situation, so that was quite nice to see. The bit at the start with about the Ryan Reynolds park didn't really do a great deal for me, purely from the perspective that not a great deal has happened with that. I'm not saying that's a big negative because I'd rather they focused on stuff like the stadium and the training ground, but I just think it was quite a difficult thing to be interesting from a filming perspective because it was a patch of Greenland. It's still a patch of Greenland, and there's nothing there yet. And when they were talking about loads has sprung up on that area on Henblast Street since it was bought, I'm not really sure personally how true that is. I don't think that area of town started seeing recovery yet, but hopefully a case of watch this space. I liked the last sort of 5-10 minutes or so looking at Arthur's injury. I'd never seen that picture. I don't know if that scan picture was new of his jaw. That was it really struck home how nasty that injury was, and when he was sort of pushing his jaw back in place as well. So yeah, that's my mini episode 4 review.
Thank you. I think it also gave us one of the most enjoyable moments when is it Brian Swarbrick who was at the market getting the sort of different things. It was that someone suggested a slide where it came out from the back of a throat onto a tongue. I can't even remember what it was.
That seemed a little staged to me. I'm going to be honest about that.
Well, it worked for me anyway. So great job. I
vomiting children, I think was the word used.
I find it very funny. But there we go. Not like the voiceovers are staged at all, eh? But anyway, moving on to let's discuss episode 3 now, with our special guest this week, who's been very patiently listening to us chat nonsense, Sam Kotadia. Sam, welcome. Tell us first of all your background and how you got involved with Wrexham.
Yeah, so I've known Phil Parkinson a long time. When I left university, this would have been 2003, I think. This was Phil Parkinson's first job at Colchester. So I did a degree in psychology, and I really wanted to get into the field of professional sport. And at the time, Steve Whitton was the manager. So Phil Parkinson wasn't there yet. And basically got an offer to help out, really. So I offered my services for free, and Steve Whitton left his position, and Parky came in, and yeah, we forged a relationship there. I did quite well working with the youth team, and then he said, well, why don't you come and work with the first team? And the first player we sort of collaborated on working with was player called Alan White, who was a centre back, and he had this thing where every time he made a mistake, he would sort of dwell on it, and he'd lose 3 or 4 seconds, and then before you know it, someone would come round the back, and we really worked on his concentration, and the psychology played a part, in his season, because he became player of the year, players manager of the year, and I think it was then that Phil Parkinson thought, well, hang on a minute, maybe there's something in this psychology that actually there is a gain here. It's not a gimmick or a nice to have. It actually has a tangible benefit. So that's how I got involved with Wrexham. It pretty much down to my relationship with Phil Parkinson and working with him sort of on and off at his different clubs over the years.
And in terms of with Wrexham, was it just this season gone that you started sort of consulting, or has it been longer?
It's been 3 seasons. So I arrived in the Phil Parkinson's first season. It was October time, so he'd been there a bit to obviously bed in, and then saw that there was an opportunity there to bring a unique voice to the table in terms of the psychology. And so yeah, it'll be 3 years in October.
Sam, I can't believe that you've been working with Phil Parkinson for 20 years. Did he pluck you from bloody primary school?
I was waiting for someone to say that.
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's the other thing. I mean, do you actually have to work with Phil? Because does Phil ever doubt himself, or does he ever doubt his decisions? And does that sort of like resonate with the rest of the team, or is it more sort of a player thing where you really have to sort of delve into?
I think one of the reasons why I work so well with working with Parky is that I have a direct line with him, and I think if I'm working with certain players and he can echo that sentiment in the dressing room or on the training pitch, and that applies to the other coaches as well. But in answer to your question, yeah, sometimes there are performance questions that Parky may have, and I think often he uses me as a sounding board really to get a bit of clarity. I never sort of take the position of sort of giving too much advice, but more around asking the right questions. So the manager can come to the right solution himself. Because as we all know, they're complex environments, football clubs. There's a lot going on and a lot of considerations to take into account.
And in terms of, Phil is quite clearly, and everyone we speak to about Phil, it's obvious that he is a very good motivator. And you can see that. You see that in the way the players talk about him. He seems to get the balance right in the dressing room. What insights can you give us about Phil's character that we don't already know? Obviously, that sort of team morale is really important to him.
Yeah. So what I'd say about the psychological approach that we brought to the table is most people think psychology is around getting people into the right mindset, or helping a player have the right thoughts, and to the contrary, our approach is very different. It's actually helping players feel stable with those uncomfortable feelings or those negative feelings, and not trying to push them away. Because if I'm spending a lot of energy trying to control my mind, then I've got less energy for my football. So in some ways, it's an anti-psychology approach to psychology, if that makes sense. It is actually, Phil Parkinson is very much about the process and doing the right thing and having a real discipline within the camp. But also, I think he's also very aware to make sure it stays about the football, because if I'm trying to motivate a player, I'm telling them that they don't have motivation. If I'm trying to get a player to be more confident, I'm telling them that they're missing confidence. So I think that runs at the heart of the camp, that we stay away from positive psychology and motivation and tips and techniques and pre-match routines. Actually, it's about taking stuff off players' minds as opposed to putting more on it.
Now, I was going to say, Sam, is it about making things really simple for people,
yes,
for every player? And do you have to make things simple in different ways for different players?
I think, if you take the week of training, I think a lot of thinking and consulting probably happen at the beginning of the week. And then as you get closer to that match day, you do what less is more. So, for keywords that will galvanize the team around what the strategy is, that how the coaches want the team to play. But yeah, you do want to err on the side of simplicity, because if a player, an athlete in the zone isn't in their head. They're in their. There's a loss of self. There's an effortlessness. So definitely keeping it simple. But going back to your question, Rhys, well, I think Parky is a fantastic manager. I think he's very good at, it's a bit like a conductor in an orchestra, very good at pulling lots of voices together and getting the whole to work. I think that's a real talent, because when you look at the coaching staff, Aidan Davison, comes to mind, because I'm sure he was goalkeeper when we were at Colchester, and then Steve Parkin and Jonah. There's a real fantastic blend of different characters there, and I think Parky's sort of world-class strength is being able to pull all those voices together as well as the players.
And he's not scared to give them a bollocking, judging by some of the clips we've seen in the first 3 episodes, right? And it's probably knowing when to do that, and obviously when that crosses the line, and when not to do that is probably a major part of his management style.
Yeah, I think you can give players a bollocking and be really present with it. What I mean by that is, like, you can see coaches sort of give players a bollocking and it comes across a bit desperate. But I think it's how you do that. It's not so necessarily the words, but if you do it and you're present with it, then I think that's when you get a response from the players. But if it's coming from a place of desperation, then I think that can transmit on the players. So I think the managers, he gets that right by making sure that it's coming from some real assertiveness.
And I suppose what you mentioned earlier about getting the using the players as well to sort of almost self-regulate what's going on in the changing room, right? So it's not just top-down dominant. Is that, I suppose, he seems to have a bit of a, from what we gather, kind of a no dickheads policy. Sort of people have to pass on to personality tests to get signed for Wrexham, right? I mean, has a psychological benefit too in the dressing room, obviously, right?
Yeah, it's a big part. I don't know the ins and outs of the. Well, I know that there's a lot of work that goes on in the scouting, but yeah, I think that there's a real due diligence around what players are invited, to see if Wrexham's that fit and signing a player. So I think, yeah, it's huge, and it certainly makes a manager's life easier if he's surrounded by good guys, and I think that he's certainly been able to do that at Wrexham.
Sam, can I ask about one sort of dominant personality, which is Paul Mullin? I mean, like when he came in, like I don't think we really knew how good this guy was, right? And every bit of pressure that we've put him under as fans, as a club, as anything like that, he's absolutely maxed. And I think he is really good when the pressure is really on him. So I'm going to talk about like Boreham Wood, where we went one down, and like who got us out of the shit. Paul did. Towards the end of last season, where really and truly we needed someone to really step up. Well, Paul did it, and I think how interesting is it to deal with a guy like that?
I know Moles loves pressure, and sees it as a challenge, and I think that's a really, really healthy mindset. It's like, right, come on, game on. He's really got that outlook towards it. I think some players can sort of go into themselves a bit, but I think Moles is a player that likes an occasion, likes the challenge, and like those moments you describe, he comes to life and thrives on that.
I know you can't talk about obviously individual players and the talks you have with them, but I'm interested in how difficult it is, for example, players who are perhaps struggling with chronic injury issues or long-term injury issues, and perhaps how they're dealing psychologically with that. We've got a few players like that over the last couple of years. How difficult is it to keep spirits up in players like that?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, like I said earlier, like I'm definitely not that guy that comes in with things to do to make you feel better, but more about understanding and patience. And I think what can make an injury seem longer is if I'm constantly in my head trying to be in the right mindset. So I think an injured player needs to give themselves space to feel the frustration and the disappointment, and to be close to that rather than trying to push it away and manage it. And also, there is a psychological relationship with pain as well, that sometimes when we do feel pain in the body, we do have to listen to that as well, rather than, oh, I can't feel that. There is our body does communicate to us. So it is complex, but it's also important not to think that you've got a magic wand for it, because it's completely understandable and natural to be frustrated. But I think where you do see a quicker recovery is if a player can almost accept and be at peace with that frustration, and give that space and really listen, as opposed to constantly trying to manage their minds, and not giving them that space to feel negative. That really does help, because it removes a resistance.
I mean, Sam, this is like real sort of basic level, but I did a half marathon today, and I don't want to go into how
Did
fast
you?
I
Did you? You haven't mentioned it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
He
he hasn't mentioned it once.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, it was really fucking hot. I'm going to say that, but you know, I did all right. But basically, right, I'm asking myself questions all the way through that, and I'm no sort of performance athlete at all. But I'm asking myself, can I go quicker? Right? Could I go quicker now? Should I go quicker later? I didn't go quicker at all, but that's that's a sort of a side thing. But also, like, part of me is like, there's a voice in my head saying, should I just stop? I mean, how? Yeah, no, that voice was in my head, right? And because I didn't have like a lot of signifiers, like I didn't really know when the next mile was or something like that. Part of me was like saying, going, "Oh my god, should I really start?" I mean, these are the questions I'm asking myself as a non-performance athlete. So I would think a performance athlete that you really get in a Wrexham player who's like, you know, paid to do this. There must be a lot more questions they're asking themselves than I'm asking myself going around that course really quickly.
Yeah, yeah. So the psychology that we bring to the table here is actually, you know, that to come to the come to the conclusion that we can't control our thoughts, that thoughts come and go, they're unpredictable, they're chaotic at times. Who knows what we're going to be thinking in 10 seconds time, let alone an hour. So if we come to that realization, thoughts can be there and not interfere with your performance. What can pull a performance down is when we start to take those thoughts seriously and we think, I really shouldn't be having that one. Oh, that's a problem. Or I need more of this thought. Do you see how suddenly now we're doing loads of overtime in our minds when actually, if we want to be in the zone or in a flow state, it's again, it's just allowing those thoughts to be there. But if we jump on them and try and control them, that's when you see, you know, let's take a player taking a penalty, you know, your typical Southgate penalty, you know, for England, where, you know, there's that long, you know, that really slow walk up, and you could feel the cognitive energy in his head. You know, and time again, you know, penalties are a great example where players start to take their thoughts very seriously. Now, if we didn't take those thoughts so seriously, then we're 9 times out of 10 that ball's going to go in the back of the net. Some psychologists may disagree and think there are specific thoughts that we should try and hold on to, but you know, when you see a player in flow, they just don't mind what's coming and going in their minds, you know.
So is that like with Andy, you know, his example of, should I just stop, pull over to the side here? You know, are you saying that, you know, if a player is feeling, you know, maybe before an important training session, oh, well, I can't be asked. What if I just called in sick? It's kind of allow that thought to come, acknowledge it, and then move on, rather than beat yourself up for having the thoughts. Is that the kind of idea?
Yeah, exactly that, and that's proven to be really effective because a lot of players have the idea that there are right thoughts and wrong thoughts, and you know, we're going to go and see Sam, who's going to sort our heads out, and we're going to have a lot more positive thoughts. But actually, it's actually learning to not mind the chaotic nature of the mind, and then somehow the mind settles by itself when we just let it do its thing.
Yeah. So in like high performance athletes or high performance individuals of whatever, like Paul Mullin, like Andy Gilpin, allow those thoughts to come, move on. As a message to everyone there.
Oh yeah.
Easier said than done sometimes, that's for sure. Easier said than done, but you know, it's something that to aspire to, you know, to move towards, definitely.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about something a little bit different? I'm going to ask you about a player coming through. So a player like Max Cleworth, even sorry, even I can't say his name properly. But look, this is a guy who really and truly needs game time to really build his confidence. I think anyway, and he's had it this season, and he's got better and better as a young player. That's that's the sort of thing he needs to really build himself. So when you look at a player like that, do you deal with him in a different way than you would with I say, Paul Mullin? Do you need to reinforce some things? Do you just have to like let him sort of, I don't know, let him sort of live a little bit, or
Great question.
What do you need to do with Max?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think naturally the more experienced the player, the more likely it is that they think that they've got to get their minds right, or there's stuff they got to do in the dressing room to sort of give themselves the best chance of performing well. Now, if you take a talent like Max coming through, you know, you really just want to encourage him to just play football, and keep it as simple as that. And it's more about trying to spot and put the handbrake on when there's a danger of overthinking, or starting to think, right, this is my chance now, I've got to make this count. So it's more about just having an awareness that he sort of stays exactly where you're saying, where you come through and you just want to play football and get that game time. And again, less is more. If that's all it sounds ultra simple, but you just want your players to play football and be present with that and enjoy it and express themselves and be free, like that kid in the park kicking a ball around. And that mentality you really want to try and preserve. And I think the younger players naturally have got a taste of that. And I think you look at perhaps some more experienced players that perhaps haven't quite made it at certain clubs. A lot of that is psychological, because they're constantly trying to get back. They're constantly trying to get their heads right. I've got to play like this. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I would do that. It's basically a slump that can, you see a slump over maybe 10, 20 minutes, but a slump in, a professional footballer's career could last 3 or 4 years, where they're just constantly trying to get back to that sort of freedom. So yeah, just trying to keep it really simple I think for the younger players. So, they just thoroughly enjoy their football and express themselves,
Tomi, are you still trying to get out of that slump?
Yeah, absolutely. As a fellow high performance athlete like yourself, Andrew, yeah, it's tough, isn't it? But yeah, just in terms of it must be so nice to work with a group of players. As we know that the Parky no dickhead policy, Sam. I'd imagine that this group are a pleasure to work with, aren't they? I can't imagine there's too many. Not that you tell us anyway, but I can't imagine there's too many bad apples in there.
Yeah, no, they're a fantastic group. But what I would say is that the way Phil Parkinson would use the sports psychology, he wouldn't sort of make a song and dance of it, and get me up on center stage motivating. But it's more, the way we would work is, if there were certain players that think that would benefit from this kind of exploration and insights, we'd always have a little meeting first. And Parky would talk about how we've worked together over the years, and then invite the player to want to explore. So certainly it's every player I've spoken to and working with has been a joy. They've been really curious and inquisitive, and I think the culture gets curious about it. And we've had players that then come off their own back and say, "Oh, Sam, what are you doing there? That looks quite interesting." And I think that for me is the most rewarding, because it shows on a subtle level we're shaping a culture, not in a kind of Anthony Robbins sort of self-help, like, right, 10 steps to success way, but a lot more subtle, and that's, I think that it helps massively that I work closely with Parky in that way, and we make sure that it is integrated in an appropriate way, not in a, again, top down way.
Sam, before I bring Rhys in, sorry, my last question. Is there any sort of position that you think you need to work with more a little bit? I'm sort of saying maybe goalkeepers, or maybe a striker, or is there sort of any sort of thing that you think, okay, well, maybe I need to like help them out a little bit more?
No, I don't think so. I think it is, quite evenly distributed, really. I don't think, every position has its kind of unique skill set, but fundamentally the psychology applies for all positions, that when we leave our minds alone, when there's less on our mind, then flow and freedom and all those great performances show up. And I think that's a principle that is relevant for any of the players at Wrexham and any professional athlete.
Going back to what you said earlier about the length of time you've been working with Parky, so 20 years, you joined with Colchester. Do you know if you and Colchester at the time was something of an outlier in having a sports psychologist? It strikes me as rather unusual, maybe in sort of the early noughties, a lower league club. Were there many that was sort of, I know you mentioned you were unpaid at the time, but sort of, that were having sports psychologists in and speaking to the players and the management?
Yeah, I think there's always been coaches and psychologists around, but I think what's unique is the way certainly at Colchester, perhaps not some, we've done bits and bobs in between a few of other Parky's clubs, but I think it was more the way we work. Like, I think sometimes clubs will think, right, we've got some important matches in, let's get a motivational speaker in and do a little bit and get everyone fired up.
Yeah.
I do think the way, that sort of the way we've worked and the trust that, the manager and I have, I think certainly is unique. So I think at that time, yeah, it's definitely got more popular, sports psychology. Um, Again, I would say that the approach that we have at Wrexham is a little bit different from the mainstream approach to sports psychology. That we're kind of saying that the mind doesn't need to be fixed or got into the right state of mind. That actually, it's fine when you leave it alone. So, yeah, but it's got more popular. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and did you still come up against obstacles of, certain people sort of, I don't know, maybe rolling their eyes a little bit, kind of going, oh, do we really need this?
Yeah, I think, like what I was, coming out of uni at Colchester, I found it daunting, really, really scary. And like some players wouldn't show up to sessions and, there were times when I first started, like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, am I just making up the numbers here? Is it just a bit of a gimmick? But I can't really put into words what sort of kept me going in the industry. I think certainly, financially at times it hasn't always been easy. I've had to hustle a bit and, do bits in, psychology and business. So it's been an interesting journey.
Sam, can I just ask you about the sort of day to day? So, I mean, do you live over in Wrexham? Are you still sort of Essex based? I mean, how sort of often would you like deal with the players really?
So I'm up maybe once or twice a month. So I get sort of the face-to-face sessions with the players I'm working with. Gives me a chance to have a catch up with the coaching staff as well. And then I'm Bristol based. And then during the month, I'll probably have a few phone calls with the players I'm talking to. Send a few reminders as well from what perhaps we've discussed in our conversations, as sort of means to help remind them of what we were exploring. So
Sam,
yeah.
Sorry.
No. It's fine.
No. Sorry to cut you off there, but is there certain players that you sort of identify and think, right, I need to work with this guy a little bit more, and there's other players where you sort of think, right, okay, I think he's pretty set?
Yeah, there have been moments where you look at, when players sort of, you see it, and again, any player, will do this from time to time, is over try or go looking for it. We all get that sense on the pitch when a player's trying too hard and, will make two mistakes in the row because they're over aroused or, they're, just trying too hard. So I think, when you see a player that's consistently perhaps a little bit intense, a little bit too eager, then definitely like this sort of philosophy and approach really helps to, pull a player back into that sort of sweet spot.
Sam, just looking a bit into your own work, because I've been really interested. I found out sort of before you came on this is that you've co-written a book which had some involvement from Cristiano Ronaldo, Win the Day. Can you just tell us a bit about that and, sort of the mentality of an elite athlete like that just absolutely fascinates me, to be honest.
Yeah, so how that came about, I was a player that I worked with at Charlton Athletic when Parky was managing the club, Jose Semedo. Really benefit from the psychology and said, oh, when he went to Sheffield Wednesday, he sort of kept me on a retainer to keep working with him. And, like amazing chemistry, like just could talk for hours about psychology. And, we thought, why don't we document this? And, Jose, we didn't expect Ronaldo to write the forward. We thought, that there might be a chance because they're Jose and Ronaldo are really good friends. And yeah, so the book was just, a testament about, like you say, that world-class mentality that Ronaldo had and Jose Semedo growing up, where they used to sneak into the gym late at night when they were in Sporting Lisbon's academy to get extra training sessions in. Both of them really, really similar mentality. Just would, they go and study the Portuguese runners to work out how to run faster. And I think that they really sort of spotted each other on their football journeys. And it's psychologically, it's really powerful if you got a buddy that can kind of spot you in that mentality and working hard and discipline. It's it was a real sort of pleasure to sort of learn about Ronaldo and Semedo and them growing up and their mentality. That
yeah,
yeah,
because there's a lot of those athletes where you just think it's little things like that. Just the going the extra mile, the relentlessness. Really, it fascinates me. Just seeing how they become that player, how they become that person.
I think also, and this is something I share with the Wrexham players, is like, don't just treat the match as the most important thing. When you go home, if you're making dinner, treat that as 3 points. If you're reading a book to your kids, show up, really be present there. So and that's what I definitely learned from Jose and Ronaldo, that just bring your best self to everything that you do. Don't sort of mug off those days in the week where nothing important's happening, because it's really, really hard to turn it on match day. If you haven't been cultivating that presence and that mentality during the week at home with your family and friends and, looking after yourself, it's really hard to then suddenly go, right, I've got a game on now, So they made this sort of world-class focus a lifestyle, and I think from what I see, I think that went a long way to, put Ronaldo at the top of the game.
He's nuts, isn't he? Ronaldo, just like what you can see from documentaries and stuff. He's absolutely. I've never seen anyone more sort of really sort of devoted to it.
We don't say nuts,
word.
Andrew.
Yeah, devotion.
We don't say nuts. He's mental. He is. Yeah. So.
But yeah, devotion. I think devotion is a great word. Like really, just devoted and they're both very grateful as well. Like they don't see they had to work hard. Both of them really, really, really work hard, and I think that's again an important thing to cultivate. Your question around your Maxes and your Jake Bickerstaff, that really cultivate a good lifestyle from a young age and see it as such a privilege to be able to play football, not a given right, irrespective of how talented you are.
Sam, fascinating chat and really grateful for your time. We really appreciate it. And actually, you've reminded me of a little feature that we were going to do quickly, which is inspired by someone else who seems to be turning up, not just for Wrexham, but judging by his Instagram, James McLean's vicious boxing training, which he seems to be taking part in, which maybe gives an insight into sort of how on it he is in the off season as well. What we'd like to do is go around the panel and ask. You might not be able to help with this, Sam, but if you've got a I don't know, maybe you've got an archive somewhere of 90s Wrexham players that you can pull out. But for a Wrexham player who we think could do a job inside 12 rounds in the ring. Andy, who do you think is a Wrexham player from past or present, who could win a bout?
Are we talking about against James McLean?
Yeah, maybe. Why not? Why not?
I mean, because that's pretty nuts. Okay. Oh, I'm not allowed to say nuts. Sorry. Pull me on that. Okay. So you basically asked me who's the hardest.
Yeah.
Okay.
But disciplined as well, right?
Disciplined, hard. Do you remember where we had Darren Ferguson against Sean Holmes?
Oh, yeah.
No one thinks Sean Holmes would win because Darren's so committed. Anyway, it's not Darren. I'm not going to go anywhere there. I actually think don't mess with Dennis Lawrence. 6'7", wiry, but this is the key thing. I mean, you're looking at me like I'm talking nonsense. Ex-soldier.
Was he?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
They all were, I think, weren't they? Carlos and Hector Sam. They were.
I mean, if I'm going to run onto any sort of like airfield, I'm going to take on Carlos. I'm not actually. I'm going to take on Hector. I'm going to take on Hector.
Yeah.
Hector would just let me go, but I wouldn't take on Dennis because Dennis would hunt me down.
And Dennis has got. Yeah, I was going to say he's got a wingspan. Liam.
I'm going to go for Brian Carey, and this is down to a personal encounter I had outside the racecourse where we were having a bit of a row with former owner Jeff Moss outside. And then Brian just pops out with a tray of sandwiches, says, "Is everything all right, lads?" But it was the sort of, "Is everything all right, lads?" where it appeared really calm. But I was like, if I give the wrong answer here, things could turn very quickly. So yeah, Brian Carey for that reason.
Yeah. Tommy.
Is it too obvious to say the beast, Mark Creighton? I'm going to go for him. I mean, he's, he just looks like a hard case to me. I'm sure he is. Yeah. He's a top man as well. I've got a lot of time for him. But in terms of, fighting against James McLean, I'm sure Martin Riley would enjoy stepping in the ring. I think their political views would be completely at odds with each other. So that would be an interesting one.
That would be interesting. I'm going to go.
Can we do something as basic of which member of the current Wrexham team would you least like to fight?
Well, and that's what I'm going to do with psychology Sam thing. Don't steal my thunder. So I'm going to say Dennis Smith. So I'm going to go for a manager, and he would beat Andy up as well. But just one of these.
Love to beat me up.
Yeah, he'd love it. Just a no nonsense guy who is similar to sounds like to Brian Carey, who you wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of. Sam, we're going to hold you to the final word of the podcast. If someone in the squad is going to beat James McLean in boxing, who's it going to be? Who would you put your money on?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd quite fancy Elliot Lee there. It's quite,
Really? That is interesting because who was it? Humphrey who was saying, I can't remember, someone was saying to us about Elliot Lee.
Like to fight. He doesn't want to fight Elliot Lee.
Yeah, pound for pound is just sort of scary sort of athlete.
You almost got sort of a bit of a sort of Mike Tyson build there that you wouldn't mess with. They're quite well set.
He'd give you that big old diamond smile before he whacks you. That would be a great thing to arrange, actually. Maybe a next Fearless in Devotion live night, James McLean versus Elliot Lee. Not sure we'll get that past them. But anyway, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Sam, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, really enjoyed
it. And we'll be back hopefully next week. Until then, bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.